What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the playthrough reviews, and we finally made it. Today we are going to review Resident Evil Village. When I started this whole Resident Evil playthrough review thing, I started almost 2 years ago with Resident Evil 0. 12 games later, here we are. When I started, Village wasn't even announced yet, so initially I was going to end on Resident Evil 7, but in the middle of my playthrough, Village got announced, and I added that on top of the list. And at the end of this video, I will be giving my definitive ranking of the entire Resident Evil series, the core series. But before I get started, if you like watching me play through entire video game franchises and ranking and reviewing them along the way, then please head on over to my channel, Trezinator, and give me a subscribe. Click the bell to get notifications every time I post a new video. So before we get into it, let's just remind everyone watching what my ranking currently is. And here it is up on the screen here. So when Resident Evil Village first came out, I was in the middle of playing through Resident Evil 7. I thought Village looked fantastic and I was really enjoying Resident Evil 7, but I couldn't wait to get past Resident Evil 7 so I could start playing Village. And I enjoyed 7, watch my review on that if you haven't yet. But as soon as I started Resident Evil Village, from the moment I started to the moment I stopped, it just pulled me in. And there's not a lot of games that do that to me to this capacity. So that is something that should be said of Village. I thoroughly enjoyed it, but before I get into my ranking, let's talk about it. Resident Evil Village was released on May 7th, 2021 for the Xbox Series X, PS5, and PC. Now, it was also released on last-gen consoles as well, and I played this on PC. It was directed by Muramasa Soto and written by Anthony Johnston. And we got a solid storyline. It picks up 3 years after Resident Evil 7. It follows the Winters family again. Ethan Winters is the main protagonist. It keeps the majority of the play style that Resident Evil 7 introduced to the franchise. So before I talk about my thoughts on the story and my thoughts on the gameplay, let's go over the plot real quick to catch everyone up to speed. And just a warning, there will be spoilers with this. 3 years after the events of Dulvey, Louisiana, Ethan and Mia have now been relocated to Europe by Chris Redfield to start a new life with their newborn daughter, Rosemary. One night, Chris and his Hound Wolf squad raid the house, assassinate Mia, and abduct Ethan and Rosemary. Ethan awakens next to the crashed transport truck where they were riding in and reaches a nearby village terrorized by werewolf-like creatures known as lichens. Ethan is unable to save the remaining villagers and is captured and brought before the village priest Mother Miranda and her lords, Alcina Dimitrescu, Donna Beneviento, Salvatore Moreau, and Carl Heisenberg. Ethan escapes a death trap made by Heisenberg and ventures into Dimitrescu's castle to find Rosemary, with the support of a mysterious local merchant known as the Duke. Ethan eliminates Dimitrescu and her daughters, finding a flask containing Rosemary's head. The Duke explains that Miranda placed Rosemary's body parts in 4 different flasks for a special ritual and that she can be restored if Ethan recovers the other flasks held by the remaining lords. While killing Beneviento and Moreau for their flasks, Ethan learns Hound Wolf is also in the village. Ethan passes a test from Heisenberg for the 4th flask and is invited to the Lord's factory, where Heisenberg offers a proposal to defeat Miranda together. Ethan refuses once he learns Heisenberg intends to weaponize Rosemary and escapes. Ethan encounters and confronts Chris over Mia's death, learning the Mia Chris killed was Miranda in disguise. Chris reveals that Miranda possesses the power of mimicry, and was attempting to abduct Rosemary, succeeding when she crashed the transport truck. Chris destroys Heisenberg's factory, while Ethan uses a makeshift tank to defeat Heisenberg. Miranda confronts Ethan and kills him after she reveals her plan to take Rosemary as her own. Witnessing Ethan's death, Chris leads Hound Wolf to extract Rosemary, while a BSAA assault force distracts Miranda. Chris enters a cave beneath the village and discovers a metamycete and the Black God, the source of the mold. He plants a bomb on the metamycete and finds Miranda's lab, learning that she has lived a century since coming into contact with the metamycete and was a mentor to the Umbrella Corporation's founder, Oswell E. Spencer. Oswell used her knowledge to eventually develop the T-virus. Miranda experimented with the fungus in an attempt to revive her daughter, Eva, who had succumbed to the Spanish flu. The 4 lords, Lichens, and Eveline all being failed experiments. Miranda found a suitable host with Rosemary due to her special abilities inherited from Ethan and Mia. Chris also rescues the imprisoned Mia, learning that Ethan is still alive when Mia reveals her husband's powers. Ethan revives after encountering Eveline in Limbo, who reveals that he was killed in his first encounter with Jack Baker in Dulvey, but was revived by her mold, which gave him regenerative abilities. And that reveals how Ethan can just like reattach his hand and can just heal from all of this damage that he's taking throughout these 2 games. The Duke brings Ethan to the ritual site where Miranda is attempting to revive Eva, but only succeeds in reviving Rosemary. An enraged Miranda battles Ethan, who kills her, before the Metamycete emerges from the ground. Ethan, his body deteriorating from the regenerative powers having reached their limit, sacrifices himself to detonate the bomb planted on the Metamycete, while Chris transports Mia and Rosemary to safety. As Mia mourns the loss of Ethan, Chris discovers that the BSAA soldiers sent to the village were organic bioweapons and orders his squad to head for the BSAA's European headquarters. In a post-credit scene, a teenage Rosemary visits Ethan's grave before being called away for a mission on behalf of an undisclosed organization. As she and her escort drive off into the distance, an unknown figure is seen approaching their vehicle. So there it is, the plot for Resident Evil Village, and this game was so good. The plot was so good. The voice acting in this game was incredible, probably the best voice acting in any of the franchise so far that I've played, and actually one of the best voice acting in games that I can remember over the past few years. That is kind of what also drove me in, was that the acting, everything just felt so smooth in this game. The game feels a lot bigger than it actually is when you kind of come in and you see the village and there's all these different parts and castles and wherever that you have to go to. And you have a great cast of characters with this as well. I feel like all 4 of the lords had a pretty decent backstory for what you were given. The Duke, bringing the Duke in as a new merchant. Everyone loves the merchant from Resident Evil 4, but the Duke really rivaled him because he had just so much more personality, and the fact that like they touch upon that they kind of know each other, and that the merchant might be this kind of like otherworldly thing in the Resident Evil universe. I really love that lore. This game brings Resident Evil's lore full circle because you have Mother Miranda, who has been alive for a full century, who, because of the Metamycete, I still have a hard time pronouncing that word, and I think I'm pronouncing it correctly, but I'm not sure. But you have her who was the mentor to Spencer, who developed the T-virus. It just brings everything together, which I thought was very, very well done. And it was a great follow-up to Resident Evil 7. I'm interested to see where they're going to go with the story, because Resident Evil 7, as good as it is, it still kind of felt disconnected to like the rest of the series, where this kind of brings everything back into the franchise. I do feel like the game did have its fair share of twists, but I think they did it pretty well. Nothing was like super shocking of a twist. I guess the Miranda mimicking Mia might have been like the most shocking thing, but we always kind of knew something was going on with Ethan, where like he can just reattach his hand, where he can suffer these injuries and just kind of like regenerate. So it was good to get the clarification of that at the end of the story, because we always knew that something was going on there, but they didn't really tell us anything until when you find out by either reading the files or hearing it from Mia. So overall, this story, I think it was one of the best stories in the Resident Evil franchise. It kind of rivals the story from Resident Evil 4, because I think 4 was also a pretty good story, but I think this one, it goes deep. So props to the team for this fantastic story and to the writers, and I can't wait to see where the series goes from here in terms of lore. Now my thoughts on the gameplay. So it wasn't as scary as Resident Evil 7, unless you count the baby boss fight, which freaked me the fuck out. What the fuck is that? Oh my god! And if you want to watch more of that, I do have my whole video of me escaping this giant baby, which was one of the scariest moments in video game history for me, in my opinion. This was more of an action-y type game. So if we look at Resident Evil 7 as Resident Evil 1, with its like horror elements and everything, I think Village is more comparable to Resident Evil 2, where it still has those horror elements, but it's a little bit more action-oriented. And that's the kind of games that I usually enjoy more. I know some people are more on the Resident Evil 7 bandwagon because they enjoy like the survival horror aspect of it, but I think I enjoyed the Resident Evil Village gameplay a lot more. They fixed a lot of things that I had issue with in Resident Evil 7, one of them being that when you open up your inventory menu, the game doesn't pause, so you can still take damage and die. It also was hard during boss fights when you're trying to like switch weapons that wasn't actually in your loadout. You can now hit your inventory, the game will pause, and you can do this. And also in Resident Evil 7, sometimes it wasn't very responsive when you tried to drag your weapons into like your weapon wheel, and they fixed that in Resident Evil Village as well. So right off the bat, glad to see that they fixed those issues that I had with Resident Evil 7. The gameplay is super smooth. It's fantastic. The graphics look freaking great. This game just, it felt like a true next-gen game. And we get a bunch of fun boss fights yet again. I mean, Resident Evil is known for its boss fights, and these were some of, I think, the best boss fights in the series. And I know I say that like almost every time, but they do really keep like one-upping themselves along the way. I do think these boss fights were better than Resident Evil 7, and I think that they rival and might even be better than Resident Evil 4. I keep comparing this to Resident Evil 7, and that's just because they're so similar of a game. You know, first-person Resident Evil game, the story follows right into it. You're Ethan in both games, so the cast is similar. But Ethan was so slow in Resident Evil 7. Slow on reloading, slow on moving, slow when he was running, just so slow. And he's still slow in this, but he's a lot faster than he was. So it is an improvement. And I think they kept him slow in 7 because it had more survival horror elements than Village does. But I was glad to just see that he's a little bit more nimble in this game than he was in the previous one. And the one thing that the gameplay of this game did for me, I think, was it just captures the feeling of the old Resident Evil games of like, you're in the village, but you have to unlock it in sections, where it's kind of almost like you're in the mansion and you have to unlock a different wing of the mansion and find a different key to get to that part. And 7 did this a little bit too, but not as much as Village did. I feel like you backtracked more in Village, where it was like the actual village was home base, and you need to keep going back to the village to then go to it opens up another section after you defeat a boss. So there was this nostalgic feeling of playing the game, of like going back to like the home base of the village and then unlocking a different section of the village to go in there. And it brought me back to like Resident Evil 1, Resident Evil 2, which is also why I think I enjoyed this game as much as I did. Just one of the many reasons why I enjoyed it as much as I did. And this game brought back a lot of puzzles too. I mean, you had puzzles in 7 as well. Didn't really have any puzzles in Resident Evil 6, but there were a lot of puzzles to just unlock extras in the boss fights. The Moreau fight was like a puzzle slash boss fight. And that's one thing that's so great about Resident Evil is the puzzles. And I think when they were kind of in like their Resident Evil 5, Resident Evil 6 era, they kind of like lost their way on the puzzles. And now it's back with 7 and Village. So I'm glad that they kind of found their way to fit these puzzles back into Resident Evil gameplay. So where am I going to rank it? Well, I liked this more than Resident Evil 7. I think this is a better game than Resident Evil 7. So right now Resident Evil 7 sits at 3, so that means this game is definitely going to go at 3. Now the question is, can it surpass Resident Evil 2? Can it surpass Resident Evil 4, which sits at number 1 and number 2 on my list? Is this better than Resident Evil 2? I'm having a really, really hard time because I really, really like Resident Evil Village. I really like this game a lot. I had so much fun with it, and part of me wants to put it above 2 and maybe even above 4, but I don't think I can do it. I don't think I can do it at all. I'm going to have to leave this at 3 as of right now until the next Resident Evil game comes out. My definitive ranking of the Resident Evil franchise goes as follows. At number 1, Resident Evil 4. At number 2, Resident Evil 2 Remake. At number 3, Resident Evil Village. At number 4, Resident Evil 7. At number 5, Resident Evil Code Veronica X. At number 6, Resident Evil 3 Remake. At number 7, Resident Evil HD Remaster. At number 8, Resident Evil Revelations 2. At number 9, Resident Evil 0. At number 10, Resident Evil 5, at number 11, Resident Evil Revelations, and at number 12, Resident Evil 6. So that's it for me for the Resident Evil playthrough. As of right now, the release of this video, it is complete. When new Resident Evil games are going to be released in the future, I will also be playing through and reviewing them. You can watch me play through all of these games on my Twitch at twitch.tv/Tresnator. And if you like what you saw here, it would mean a great deal to me if you can give my video a big thumbs up. And if you like watching me rank and review other video game franchises, then please head on over to my channel, Tresnator, and give me a subscribe. Click the bell, all that good stuff. I hope to see you guys over there. And now that I have completed this playthrough of Resident Evil, please let me know what you would like to see me play through next. Until next time, I'll see you guys on some of my other videos.